A surname is supposed to be simple, a name passed from father to son, carried through immigration forms and marriage certificates and gravestones, meaning nothing more mysterious than which family you belong to. But there is a cluster of surnames scattered through the family Bibles of the Southern Appalachians. Scots-Irish names, English names, names that look, on paper, like they came from Glasgow or Belfast, that keep showing up somewhere they shouldn't, not on a map, in a genome. Families who have carried these names for 200 years, who could recite the whole line back to a great-great-grandmother said to be Cherokee, started sending in DNA samples expecting confirmation. What came back instead didn't match the name, didn't match the story, and didn't match the continent it was supposed to come from. The name says one thing, the blood says something else. Nobody has fully explained the gap between them. For generations, the accepted story about the Cherokee people has been told with real scholarly care, and it deserves to be told that way here too. Anthropologists and linguists place the Cherokee among the Iroquoian language peoples, likely descended from populations that split off from northern Iroquoian relatives many centuries before European contact, and moved south into the river valleys of what is now western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, and northern Georgia. Archaeological continuity in the region, village sites, pottery traditions, agricultural patterns, stretches back centuries before any Europeans set foot on the continent. Population geneticists have long grounded indigenous American ancestry in a small, well-documented set of maternal lineages, haplogroups A, B, C, D, and a rarer fifth X, the founding signatures carried by the earliest populations to cross into the Americas. This is not a fringe framework. It is the working consensus, built over decades of careful, peer-reviewed research, and it has never needed to apologize for itself. But when individual Cherokee-descended families began testing their own direct maternal lines, not through tribal enrollment offices, but through consumer labs, curious and hopeful, a surprising number of them didn't come back with any of those 5 letters at all. Here is where it gets complicated. Beginning in 2007, a private genetics firm called DNA Consultants, led by researcher Donald N. Yates, began collecting mitochondrial DNA samples from people who believed, through family tradition or genealogical paper trails, that they had a Cherokee ancestor somewhere in their direct female line. The project ran in phases through 2016 and was eventually compiled into a 2014 monograph, Cherokee DNA Studies, Real People Who Proved the Geneticists Wrong. A mitochondrial haplogroup is, in plain terms, a kind of genetic surname of its own, passed only from mother to child, unchanged for thousands of years except for small mutations, a lineage marker written into the body instead of onto paper. And the majority of participants in this project did not return A, B, C, or D. They returned T, U, X, J, and H, haplogroups with roots in the Levant, North Africa, and the Eastern Mediterranean. In one published sample, haplogroup T alone reached a frequency of 26.9%, a number startlingly close to the roughly 25% frequency of the same haplogroup found today in modern Egyptian populations. Researchers are careful to frame this as probability, not certainty, and there is a serious caveat that has to sit right alongside the number. This was not a random population sample. It was a self-selected group of people who already believed they had Cherokee ancestry before they mailed in a swab, and the work has never been independently replicated by an academic, peer-reviewed genetics team. It is a real, published dataset. It is also a contested one. Both things can be true at once. The first theory says this is simpler than it looks. Centuries of intermarriage between Cherokee families and European settlers, English, Scots-Irish, and later others, mean that a genealogically real Cherokee ancestor from 6 or 8 generations back can be genetically almost invisible today. Admixture is the technical term for this kind of blending, and the plain language version is closer to a river absorbing tributaries. Each new stream changes the color of the water a little, until eventually the original source is present but no longer visible to the eye. In this same dataset, some individuals with strong oral traditions of full-blood Cherokee ancestry showed almost no detectable indigenous American genetic markers at all. Not a rounding error, but a near-total absence. That fits the dilution story well. What it does not explain is why the genetic material that remains skewed so heavily toward Mediterranean and Levantine types specifically, instead of the generic Western European signatures you'd expect from Scots-Irish and English admixture alone. Clean explanation. Incomplete fit. The second theory is more complicated, and this is the part the records don't explain cleanly either. Some researchers, outside the genetics mainstream but not dismissible out of hand, have pointed to the historical presence of Sephardic Jewish, Melungeon, and Mediterranean trader populations moving into the southeastern colonial backcountry earlier and more extensively than most standard histories acknowledge, intermarrying into both settler and Cherokee family lines well before or in the very earliest years of sustained European contact. Haplogroups U and J, both present at notable frequencies in the same dataset, show up disproportionately in documented studies of Melungeon-descended Appalachian populations as well. The data doesn't confirm this, it only fails to rule it out. And that failure to rule it out is exactly why the theory persists instead of dying quietly. Its limitation is just as real as its appeal. The sample size is small, self-selected, and has never been cross-checked against an independent academic dataset built without the built-in bias of people who already suspected something. The third theory is the one most researchers are hesitant to say out loud. A small number of fringe researchers have floated something older and stranger. Pre-Columbian transatlantic contact, ancient Mediterranean or Phoenician seafarers reaching the southeastern coast long before recorded European exploration, pointing to disputed place name etymologies, and the mere presence of haplogroup X in the Americas as circumstantial support. Mainstream archaeology finds no material evidence for this. No artifacts, no shipwrecks, no corroborating record, and most geneticists consider it a significant overreach from a thin dataset. But the specific concentration of Mediterranean-type haplogroups in this Appalachian population remains, as of now, without a fully satisfying conventional explanation either. Not proven, not dismissed. Left standing in the gap between two unsatisfying alternatives. Imagine standing in a small county courthouse archive in western North Carolina, in one of the back rooms nobody requests access to anymore, where the air smells like dust and old glue, and the particular staleness of paper that has not been touched in decades. A family Bible sits open on the table, its spine cracked, a name written in fading ink on the inside cover, a name that has survived 4 generations of fires, floods, and forced relocations. Somewhere in a manila folder nearby is a swab test kit, mailed back in a padded envelope years after that Bible entry was first read aloud at a kitchen table. The temperature in the room is a few degrees too cold for comfort. Outside, a county road winds past a cemetery, where half the headstones share that same surname. The question sitting in that room isn't abstract. It has a name. It has a face in a photograph tucked between 2 brittle pages. And it has, now, a genetic result that doesn't quite match the story the Bible seems to tell. And here the story stops being simple, because the twist isn't that these families were wrong about who they were. It's that the surnames themselves, the ones everyone assumed marked a line as purely European, purely disconnected from anything Cherokee, turn out to be the very names appearing over and over again across the anomalous test results. The same Anglo and Scots-Irish surnames families used as proof of European ancestry are, in case after case, attached to the mitochondrial lines carrying these unexpected Mediterranean signatures. Not by years, by centuries of intermixing nobody wrote down. The genetic mismatch that some enrollment officials and skeptical relatives once used to say, "That's not a real Cherokee marker," may actually be evidence of something else entirely. That southeastern colonial and indigenous identity was never as cleanly divided as either purely native or purely European categories allow. One researcher connected to the project described the reaction from families this way: not shock, but a kind of quiet recognition, as if a story they'd always sensed was more complicated had simply been given a shape. A woman in North Carolina who spent 3 decades tracing her line back to a great-great-grandmother said only this, when the results came back. It didn't answer the question, it just made the question bigger. That's the part nobody expected. The DNA didn't disprove the family story. It revealed that the family story was tangled with a much older, much messier regional history than anyone had bothered to ask about. Zoom out far enough, and this stops being a story about one tribe, one surname list, one contested data set. It becomes a story about the limits of using genetics to verify identity at all, native, immigrant, or otherwise. Every population that has ever been asked to prove itself with a swab test runs into the same wall. Blood doesn't move in clean, single-file lines. It pools, it mixes, it doubles back on itself across centuries in ways paper records were never built to capture. The 5 haplogroup framework that defines indigenous American for most labs is accurate as far as it goes, but it was never designed to hold the full weight of 200 years of intermarriage, migration, and forced displacement layered on top of it. Somewhere in an archive drawer, that family Bible is still sitting open to the same page, the ink no more resolved than it was before the test results arrived. Cherokee DNA records really did reveal something no one expected about these surnames, and the more closely anyone looks, the less that revelation resembles an answer, and the more it resembles a door left standing open.